Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Murray, and I want to welcome you today to the launch of Living Wage for Us and the Living Wage Places campaign. With all the organizations that have joined us today, from Just Economics, Durham Living Wage Project, Orange County Living Wage, Prosper Georgetown, Nashville Living Wage, the Tompkins County Workers Center, and the Virginia Interfaith Center. I just want to say how excited we are to have you as we look really today about a deep dive into how collaboration and how working together can really concentrate living wage efforts in specific geographies so that we can make a real difference in worker wages for workers around the world and set an example of how we can really get to a tipping point to impact entire communities. What we're going to really go through today is start with a welcome and really what our purpose is, which is understanding our place and addressing these living wage places, and hearing a little bit from our keynote address today, which is David Rolfe. I'll introduce him in just one moment, about some other targeted efforts that have had some major impacts in the past in CTAC in Seattle. And we're going to go into a roundtable discussion to talk a little bit about some of you from different locations across the US that have joined us today that bring different perspectives, worker perspectives, perspectives from some of the local living wage certification systems that exist there, government perspectives, employer perspectives, and really talking about how they can work together and what the meaning and the motivations and the movement really is behind a living wage in a specific place. And then we're going to take a little bit to launch and let you all know about Living Wage for Us, which is the new National Living Wage Certification Program launching this week as we all celebrate together as part of Living Wage Week. This is a global event. It was started by the UK Living Wage Foundation to talk for a whole week about the issue of living wages. And we're excited to be able to engage all of you in doing so today. And then we're finally going to get to the closing, talk a little bit about what you all can do and how we can go forward to continue to build a stronger living wage presence in the locations we're talking about today. So I wanted to start too, before I go into introducing David Rolfe, I wanted to start by letting you all know that if you have questions throughout the day, please put them in the chat. We're really excited to be able to answer those as we go forward. And I'm introducing here David Rolfe, who we're really excited to have with us. He's been a major push behind Fight for 15, former SEIU founder and president, and has now, luckily for us, joined the board and serves as board chair for Living Wage for Us. And he's going to talk a little bit about his efforts in the past and really the impacts that the local concentration can make.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to have been asked to serve as the founding board chair of Living Wage for Us. I wasn't quite sure I was going to do anything so grandiose as a keynote, so much as I was going to offer some reflections and thoughts after a career of working with low-wage workers and on raising American wages. The heart of the 20th century was a story of progress. It was a story of each generation doing better than their parents, always through hard work, always through struggle, often through social and political action. But it was a story of being able to look your kids in the eye and tell them that if they worked hard and played by the rules, their life was going to be better than yours had been. And that was, due in large part to a strong labor movement, a strong civil rights movement, a strong women's movement that put upwards pressure on employers and governments to do the right thing by workers. But as we arrived in the 1970s, we really had reached a point where a rising tide was lifting all boats. And then we made, as a country, a series of bad decisions. We followed the wrong leaders. We believed in the wrong economic policies. We adopted the wrong laws. And over the following 40 years, something remarkable happened for the first time in American history, is that we made life worse for most people. According to the RAND Corporation's landmark study on income inequality that was published 1 year ago last month, between the mid-70s and 2020, about $50 trillion in total gross domestic product was repurposed from the middle and the bottom of the economy to the very top of the economy. Put another way, a median American worker who made $50,000 as a full-time prime age worker in 2020 would have been making between $93,000 and $103,000 a year had that person's income merely kept pace with the growth of GDP and the growth of inflation. At the beginning of the last decade, it was really true that we were at risk of becoming a low-wage nation. And one of the things we know about low-wage nations is that as economic reciprocity norms decline and people no longer believe in a greater good, it becomes easier to turn on your neighbors. It becomes easier for political polarization to occur. And it certainly becomes harder for businesses that rely on a 70% consumer demand-driven economy to grow and to succeed. In my corner of the country here in Seattle, we were on the forefront of this generation's version of living wage campaigns. Now, of course, we can go back 25 years and look at what happened in Baltimore with the very first municipal living wage campaign requiring employers contracting with city government to pay elevated wages. We can look at the California minimum wage ballot measure in 1996, which shockingly raised the minimum wage up to $5.75, which seemed like a big deal then. But it was really a group of fast food workers in New York who went on strike in November of 2012 to demand $15 in a union that intentionally or accidentally kicked off a national wave of strikes in the fast food industry that sort of landed in Seattle, where a group of airport workers in our airport city, a small airport city of SeaTac, small city, big airport, had been trying without success to organize unions and raise their wages and benefits. And inspired by the New York fast food strikers, those workers decided, along with leaders of labor, interfaith, and immigrant rights communities, to put a ballot measure, to put an initiative on the ballot to raise the wage to $15 and also provide paid sick leave and a number of other labor standards. By 77 votes, that initiative passed in the fall of 2013 in the municipal elections. And at the same time, the much larger metropolitan city of Seattle, 15 miles north, had elected a mayor and a city council that had all gone on the record in favor of some approach to $15 an hour. The SeaTac campaign and the Seattle campaign were quite different. There were very few businesses willing to support the $15 effort in SeaTac, and most opposed it. But I remember there was one billionaire venture capitalist and one Republican small business owner who were the courageous businesses that stuck their necks out and said they were for $15 in SeaTac. The Republican small business owner was a guy named Don Liberty, wonderful name. And he owned a sports bar about a mile south of the airport. And he said, well, heck, if people in the airport get paid more money, I'm going to have more customers and people are going to come in for a burger and a beer and a game of darts after work. And it's going to help me grow my business. And he became sort of the public spokesperson in our TV ads for that campaign. Other SeaTac businesses threatened to organize a boycott of his business for his efforts, which he figured he didn't care because all of his actual customers were the airport workers who themselves were going to be the beneficiaries of the higher minimum wage. 15 miles north in Seattle, a different story ended up unfolding. The Seattle business community largely accepted that after what had happened in SeaTac and with the municipal elections of 2013, that they needed to figure out how to make $15 work. And so over a period of 4 months in the spring of 2014, a group of labor leaders, business leaders, community leaders, anti-poverty leaders, and public officials met several times a week, often late into the night, to negotiate out the parameters of what became the first big city's $15 minimum wage law in the country. And so while SeaTac was in some ways a story of campaigns and fights, Seattle was in some ways a story of collaboration and labor business partnership to reach solutions that would ultimately work for everybody. It has been a signal success story. After the wage went up, unemployment went down, poverty went down. 100,000 people in a city of 700,000 got a substantial wage increase. The public, which had supported that policy by 60-some% prior to its passage, supports it by 80-some% today. and Seattle and SeaTac became the first dominoes to fall that today have put more than 1/3 of American workers living in places that will ultimately be covered by $15 wage laws. But we all know that's not enough. $15 seemed like an awfully big deal in the fall of 2012. And as much as anyone might tell you, there was some science behind it, like, oh, it was halfway between the point where the minimum wage would be if it had risen from inflation versus where if it had risen with productivity. It wasn't concocted in a lab. It was an inspirational, morally bold, and aspirational number that workers were willing to walk off the job to fight for. And that was ultimately the beginning of that story. But today we know a lot more. First of all, we know that higher wages don't kill jobs. We know they create jobs. We know that when consumers have more money in their pockets, that businesses have more customers and they hire more people and they pay them more money and they become customers, and a virtuous cycle of growth continues. Number two, I think we've now proven the case that higher wages are a winner when it comes to public opinion. Not only do places like Seattle and New York routinely vote for higher wages, places like Florida and South Dakota and Arkansas and Alaska, every time those voters get a chance to vote for higher wages, they do so. But finally, we have now, thanks to Michelle and her work and a bunch of other excellent work in academia and philanthropy and in the think tank sector, we know exactly how much a living wage is everywhere in the country. And it's most places not 15. Mostly it's a lot higher. So that's why I'm so excited to continue the work I engaged in for so long as an organizer and labor leader, and join this board and support Michelle and her team in any way I can. Because ultimately, we all do better when we all do better. And the opportunity to partner with business enterprises, with the civic and governmental sectors, with academic and think tank partners, to create a national consensus about shared prosperity is, I think, one of the most important and inspirational projects that any of us could be involved in. And although ultimately I think we'd all prefer if we had the kind of federal government that was capable of making bold and decisive action to improve the lives of all Americans on a routine basis, the importance of place and the importance of these highly local efforts to engage business, government, labor, community not-for-profits, and workers themselves in efforts to lift the wages is, I think, the most actionable and immediate way that we can start to see some continued progress. So that was hardly a keynote in my 10 minutes, but I just want to thank all of you for being here. Thank especially Michelle for her leadership and her social entrepreneurialism and her coalition building in making this week possible. So I will go back on mute and turn things back over to our leader, Michelle.
Well, thank you so much, David. And it's so good to hear from your experience. And I appreciate everything that you've put forward. I wanted to take us all a second. I'll share my presentation again to talk a little bit about our roundtable speakers that are coming on and what different areas they're representing. We have people from Asheville, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, Hillsborough, North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina. We've got another one from Richmond, Virginia. And it's, I think, a really important piece for us to say thank you all for coming from different places. And we heard a lot from David there about some of the impacts that's happened when we concentrate in places. As Living Wage for Us is launching, a lot of what we would like to do is support all the amazing organizations we've partnered with today who've come before us, and done incredible work on living wages, and think about where do we fit in and how do we make partnerships, because everyone on this call has a role to play in really doing something amazing that can get us all excited, something that can really show how we can focus and make wage changes in a really focused way, in a way that business is better for business, better for employers, better for workers, and better for entire communities. And I wanted to start off by just asking some questions from Vicki Meath, who's on here, and just wanted to ask you, Vicki, if you could tell us a little bit about local living wage certification programs, your role in them, the Living Wage Network, and how you see all these local campaigns working with for us as we launch to advance living wage places in the US.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. So again, my name is Vicki Meath. I'm the director of Just Economics, and we're a small nonprofit over here in Western North Carolina. Oops, sorry about that. We are working to build a more just and sustainable local economy. And one of the things that we do is living wage certification. Because we believe living wages are foundational to a more just economy. We have to have a better starting place. And that there is something fundamentally and morally wrong when even a full-time worker can't put a roof over their head and food on their table without some type of help. We know that we need a better starting place than $7.25 an hour. That's the federal minimum wage. It's been the same since 2009, so 12 years. And we know workers, advocates, and business owners can raise the wage floor together. So we started this living wage certification program over here in Western North Carolina, modeled after one from Ithaca, New York, and our friends at the Tompkins Worker Center. I think we'll hear from Jonathan here in a minute. It has been an effective strategy for us to help raise the wage floor. Just Economics now has over 400 living wage certified employers in Western North Carolina. And because we were seeing real impacts, the on-the-ground impacts of workers getting wage raises, people talking about the living wage rate as a more just minimum than the minimum wage. And we were seeing the impacts of the public dialogue around living wages. We knew that this work was important, and we joined forces with the Tompkins Worker Center to create a guide and help other communities learn how to use this tool. And eventually we began working with United for a Fair Economy to help local programs join together through the Living Wage Network, sharing ideas and strategies to advance these programs and living wages in the communities that we're in. So I am really excited to partner with Living Wage for Us. And I really think that organizations that are part of this National Living Wage Network are advancing this concept of living wage places that's being talked about in the UK. And this new partnership will contribute more and help these living wage places grow. So in Asheville, and I'm going to wrap up here in just a second, I promise. In Asheville, North Carolina, for example, where our organization is centered, we're tackling living wages from multiple angles. At a public policy level, we have a living wage policy that applies to city workers. We're part of the statewide campaign to raise the minimum wage. At a community level, we were working with and engaging low-wage workers in communication, advocacy, and decisions about living wages and educating the community. At a local business level, all of these certified businesses raising their wage floor are helping to create this living wage place. And then working with For Us, we can help us reach larger businesses with a larger, more national scope. So this to me is the essence of a living wage place, a place where community is accepting a more just and sustainable living wage floor. And I think that we have the opportunity to grow living wage places, initiating from these local programs represented in the National Living Wage Network and growing living wage places from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vicki. That's so helpful. I want to go ahead and shift gears a little bit to talk about engagement with government. And to ask some questions of those that are here from the Office of Community Wealth Building in Richmond, Virginia today. I actually have a couple of questions for you all, and I know that there's a couple of folks here that are both from the same office, Kelvin Harris we have, and also we have Yvette Roots. And so I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and see if we can trade off on who wants to take which one first. But I wanted to start by generally asking what you think is the role of government in working with the community to advance a living wage.
Good afternoon, Michelle, and everyone on the panel. I'm Kelvin Harris. Thank you for having us today. First off, let me thank David also for giving that history, because as I go through this, I learn more and more. And I think we are also indebted to Vicki because we have modeled our living wage initiative after the Asheville, North Carolina, which the Virginia Interfaith Group is kind of our lead. As it relates to the specific question on the role of government with this, if I think back to my kind of economics 101 class when we talk about the role of the government in economics, and we talk about providing a legal or social framework within the economy as it exists today. It is, I guess, very, very appropriate that a major bill got signed today, and our mayor went to Washington, D.C. to see the signing of that bill. And as we work through the pandemic, one of the things that government can do is take a leadership role, but it does not have to be the primary driver of that. Because as we know in today's politics, things are very divisive. So sometimes you need to have an entity that you support that goes across both sides of the aisle. David summed it up very correctly in terms of the economics. When you talk to one side of the aisle, you have to give them the economic case for why this is good for everyone. And when you talk to the other side of the aisle, you look and you say, it's just the right thing to do. We work specifically with trying to reduce, eliminate, and eradicate poverty in a specific section of Richmond overall where there's concentrated poverty. And it was maneuvered like that based on infrastructure things and stuff like that, that actually isolated this community. And these jobs have been very, very limited in terms of that. The one example we can see, and one thing that we did in the city when we decided to get involved with the Living Wage campaign was to put forth policy and to practice what we preach. And the city of Richmond actually put forth legislation to raise its floor in terms of the lowest workers there to at least what we call the silver level for a living wage. And we continue to do that work. We also do a lot of work with workforce development, and that's my subject matter area. And we have started a new department in my office that I'm running called Integrated Support and Special Projects. And what we're asking when we work with contractors and other employers and vendors is to really take a look with the people that we actually contract with to see if they pay a living wage. We let them be aware of those things. And we also urge the actual jobs that we are trying to target our population to be striving toward a living wage. So we're doing a lot of things with some emerging economies such as cybersecurity, solar panel installation, and those types of things in our workforce program. And lastly, I think the thing that we can do is be vocal advocates for this from top to bottom, whether we're talking to participants and educating them on the Living Wage campaign and having people to actually not kind of be pigeonholed or think, oh, because this job is considered low skill or semi-skilled, that they do not have the ability to earn a good wage. And the large example of that is what's going on now with the worker shortage in the restaurant industry here we're looking at. The economy has dictated now, we have people going to fast food, yet they're starting out getting $15, $16 an hour. But we also want to celebrate those people who are on the forefront. And our mayor has done that with recognizing those businesses. So I think that's some of the things that government can do. And like you said, we can always do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. And it's incredibly helpful, and it really shows what an amazingly important job that government really has to play. I have another question just while we're talking on the subject of government that maybe Yvette, if you wouldn't mind answering for me, and we'll switch over. But I was really curious that when you're talking about living wages and you're talking about low wages, women, people of color, indigenous people, and other historically excluded communities have been sort of disproportionately represented amongst low wage workers. Can you tell us a little more about the Office of Community Wealth Building and how working with community to advance living wages is one piece of building a more equitable local economy, so that we can all think about in each of our locations how we might try to take some of the same path?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, and congratulations on this new venture. I really appreciate the work that you're actually doing. Thank you so much for that. Richmond is really focusing, I believe, not only on the individuals that are actually getting the jobs, but we're also making sure we focus on the businesses. I think that's very important because we're looking at what I consider to be various career pathways that we know will actually pay a living wage. I think it's very important to collaborate, and we're doing that as we do the work alongside the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We're also collaborating on the state level as well as on the local level. When we first took a look at this model, we were very interested in how we could move people up a ladder towards self-sufficiency. Well, you know, in order to do that, we have to make sure that their job actually pays a living wage. And looking at that, what we realize and what we recognize is that, you know, there are folks that are actually working 8 hours, obviously, you know this, but they're unable to put food on their table. And so we made a concerted effort to look at those industries that we could actually make sure that those individuals could actually make a living wage, okay? And then we also collaborated with Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy so that we could actually collaborate with them as they went to the General Assembly to say, we know that this is not economically feasible if we want to actually raise the bar when it comes to poverty. The folks in Richmond, we have a 26, at one time, especially in 2017, when we first started this, this campaign, we had a 26% poverty rate. 50% of our children lived in poverty. We knew that we could fix that if we could have their parents actually work every day and make a living wage. And so with the help of Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, they actually advocated to the General Assembly to say, we need to change this, and this is the reason why. He is the case for it. We can actually decrease poverty if we actually change this. And we were very fortunate that in the year 2020 at the General Assembly, we started 2021 with an increase of our minimum wage to $9.50 an hour, okay? It was $7.25. In 2022, in January, in just a couple of months, our minimum wage is going to increase to $11 an hour. In 2023, we're going to go up to $12 an hour. Now, we're scheduled to go up to $13.50 in 2025 and then $15 by 2026. But that is all contingent on the General Assembly that's going to happen in the year 2024. It's no secret that our administration has actually changed. The winds have shifted slightly to the right, and we don't really know what's going to happen, but we do know that this legislation is currently in place right now. So we have to be very intentional when we do this work. We have to make sure that we collaborate with partners in order to do this work. And we have to make sure that we focus on those individuals that we know that are most affected. Again, low wage workers, women that we know that are actually in these low wage paying jobs. How can we actually help to build those skills so that those individuals can move forward and literally come out of some of those low paying jobs so that they can actually participate in a career pathway that can help them to move forward.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that. I think it's super insightful. And I think one of the things that you just touched on is how important it is, how things can move, and how much government really needs the support of these wide-ranging local efforts that include civil society organizations, that include things like these standards, that include the businesses that are here, and that include the workers as well. And that leads me to ask our next question of Jonathan Ramirez, who's joining us today. Jonathan, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how oftentimes industry standards for pay in certain industries are not really a wage that someone can live on. We always hear that, well, I pay the industry average, so maybe that's enough. But really, how does that mean to your life? And, you know, as a worker that's saying, maybe the industry standard's not enough, and what difference does it make in your workplace for you and your coworkers to actually earn a living wage?
Well, I'm not sure how well you guys can hear me. Having a job that pays a living wage makes everything a lot more comfortable. And I think that's something that we're all after. It's all about comfort. When you're looking for a job, or you're out there job hunting and you're looking at the price, you're not just looking at how much you're going to get paid for the value of your time. You're looking at, is that really worth what I'm doing? Is that going to put, as you guys mentioned, a roof over my head or food on my table? Is that time that I'm willing to spend away from, let's say, my child in order to put that labor forward? Living wage isn't just something that people are going to sit down and think about when it comes to themselves. It comes to everything. We all know time is money. And when it comes to a living wage, it's how valuable do you think you are? And that's what a lot of people, including myself and the people I work with, look forward to, especially when we come to work. It's a very low stress work environment because we know that with the work that we're putting and the time that we're putting forward, we do have a roof over our heads to go home to. We do have food on the table. So every day we're a little more motivated to wake up. We're a lot less stressed when we do come to work, and it makes everything a lot easier upon us.
I mean, that's enormously important. And that's really what we're looking at here is making sure that you have the ability, and that I have the ability, and that every one of our, the workers across the country have the ability to focus in on work and not have to stress out about whether or not you're going to be able to pay for something for your whole family to eat for dinner, or how you're going to be able to pull that off, or whether or not rent's going to be in full, because sometimes it's tight. And we all see that, and we all know that in COVID. So it's really helpful having you share that. I sincerely appreciate it. And I want to go on to asking some of our employers questions, moving on from that. So I'm gonna first go to Sandy. Let me shift over to you really quick and ask you, Sandy, if it is, why did you really become a living wage certified employer, and why is it important to you as an employer to pay your workers a living wage?
Yeah, thanks for having me on this conversation. I think what's interesting for me is we started as a sustainable business. We launched in 2004. And so we've always had the triple bottom line focus of planet and people and profits front of mind. So I'm happy to say that the sustainable business community is growing. And so there's a lot more of us, and collectively there's a lot more opportunity to make a real impact and a real dent in society together. But this feels so basic to me. So I have a hard time relating to companies for whom it's not like in their blood and in their foundation of their operation. It does mean that, there's a lot of assumptions we made that felt really naive. I was so young when we started the company. So we've always paid 100% of everyone's health insurance premiums, for example. It's a lot harder if that's not a basic part of the first, of day one operations to make that shift. And I totally respect how challenging that can be when you're looking at your profit and loss statement and trying to figure out how to make that shift happen. So I think in many ways, we're just very lucky that that's kind of been part of our nature. The certification came about as soon as we were eligible. We moved from one county to the next, and Durham, fortunately, has a great program in place. We just really benefit a lot from third-party certification programs. I can't say enough. We work with farmers and sell vegetables into wholesale markets, supermarkets, and restaurants and such. I can't say enough how helpful it is for us to be able to participate. I really appreciate what Kelvin said about practicing what you preach. In many ways, it just comes down to that. We know that our customers and their customers support us because of our values. So we obviously need to show up in every way we possibly can for those values. And nothing makes it easier than a third-party certification program. So, you know, we do it with food safety and organics, and we're part of this amazing Fair Food Project that talks about workers' rights on the farms. So for us, it actually is just, we need to be able to exist in a society where there are programs like the Durham Living Wage Project so that we actually can outsource that. And I always like to really talk about how much in sustainable businesses, these audit programs are not just like a finish line and, you know, you make your grade and it's a passing grade and woohoo, you pat yourself on the back. For me, it's really, you know, resiliency and regeneration is all about continuous improvement. And so it's critical that we see where we didn't hit points in other programs. Obviously, Living Wage is a much more simple project than everything else. But, you know, we're always still looking, even in the living wage aspect, of how can we continue to show up for our employees in ways that aren't necessarily just about what they take home that moment. So whether it's, you know, when COVID hit and we're frontline workers, we started paying for mental health copays. You know, everyone's on the insurance program, but you still have a copay when you see therapists. So, you know, things like that are just really important for people to be able to stay connected to their sense of self, their sense of purpose. That's what helps everybody, you know, continue to wake up and come to work and have a positive attitude, right? So, yeah, I'm really grateful for the existence of the program. As soon as we moved to Durham from another neighboring county, it was like, let's go. This is a priority for us. And now it's just a matter of being more part of the community of living wage projects around the country. So I'm really excited about this launch.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much and appreciate you being here today. And then I want to go to one other employer we have today, Annie Burton with State Farm. Let me switch you over really quickly. And Annie, I appreciate you being here as well and wanted to ask you a similar question, but I really wanted to know, feeding off of what was just said, how important is it to you to be connected to a larger movement for living wages? And what's really the impact on your community for employers and government and organizations and workers and advocates to be part of a living wage place? I want to see really how you see your role as an employer in that sort of greater picture.
Thank you for having me. Number one, I'm I'm a living wage employer. I believed in, I was actually a certified, I worked as an executive director for a nonprofit prior to opening in my State Farm agency, and we were actually members of the Orange County Living Wage Board, largely because I believe in it. I believe it is a right for people to earn a decent living. I grew up very poor, and I just think it's human decency and it's the right thing to do, that employers should do that. I myself, as an employer now, I believe in that. I believe that it also helps with, you know, employee retention. I think people training people who feel better about the, you know, themselves, morale locally in our economy. I feel that for every dollar that is spent or earned, obviously most people that are making a living wage are spending it in the local economy. And if you increase that, they're going to actually spend more and increase the local economy. So I believe in the living wage, and actually I'm a volunteer board member for the Orange County Living Wage Board, just because of the fact that I would like to encourage other business owners to see it from our perspective as well. This is our economy. It feels really good right now to see this I think international movement, which has been a long time like overdue. You know, I'm just really I'm really happy to be an advocate for it, and happy to be a living wage employer. And I see it in my employees that they're pleased, they're content. And again, I just think it's the right thing to do. Especially since the living wage had remained at $7.25 since 2009, and I can't wrap my head around that, quite frankly.
Thanks. And I also struggle to wrap my head around that at times. So I appreciate that there are people like you that really work hard on this and really believe in it. So I wanted to thank everyone that was on our panel for sharing with us. I mean, I think it's so important to have all of those perspectives. And I wanted to start moving a little bit into discussing living wage for us and what we're doing and how we see ourselves in the overall movement of a living wage, and how we're hoping that even though we're a national movement, we can help you all make an impact in your local spaces. So living wage for us, we're launching a For Us living wage standard and certification system today. And I wanted to say first, thank you all for being part of this with us together. It's super exciting for me personally. I've been working on this for 3 years, so it is the culmination of a lot of work trying to get here. But one of the things that we really have a theory around is that you can get to a tipping point if you have enough collaboration. And we're looking at that both from the standpoint of industry focus and having an industry focus every year that we can say, hey, can we get enough to address that prevailing wage and raise that up? Can we get enough living wage employers saying we care about this, that we don't need to have everybody on board in order to have major impacts in influencing what the overall prevailing wage of an industry is? And the industry we're working on this year is the specialty coffee industry. So a lot of coffee shops and roasters and others that are out there working and really want to make sure that their baristas and their workers are earning a living wage. And they've been coming in and incredibly interested in how they can do this as an industry. That needed a national movement. If you really want to get that kind of force. And what we're hoping is that then influences as well a lot of the ability of these local efforts that have been doing such amazing work in their own communities for so long. If industry wages come up, it influences everyone. But the other tactic we're really looking at is supporting these living wage places, because there's sometimes a barrier to local, which is if there are very large employers in a specific location, if they're sitting in Asheville, they're in Durham, or they're in Virginia, but they say, we don't want to just become a living wage employer in one town or one county or a few of our locations. We're only going to do this if we can do this across all of our operations across the US. And that's really the role that we're hoping to be able to play as well, is being able to say, hey, who in your community would it make a big difference for us to talk to and get them on board with paying a living wage? Who can we go and have those conversations with? Because there's a lot of research that shows when large employers in an area raise wages significantly, a lot of other wages go up around it as well. So that's sort of where we see our role as living wage for us in fitting in all of this. We've launched the For Us living wage standard. Our entire system is up and running this week. We've started certifying companies, and I think it's a very exciting time for us. We plan to grow a lot, but we want to call out these places and our launch of this today to say, how can we focus and make sure that we prioritize these locations, work together with all of you as great partners, and really see what happens when we all focus our efforts in a specific location. What is that tipping point where it really starts to influence the viability of a higher minimum wage, or really starts to influence other companies in terms of competing for labor, or it really starts to influence consumers in a community having enough money to pump further into the local businesses that are raising wages for them? Those are the things that we want to look at, and those are the things that we really want to see. So our system, we have a lot of events planned, and this is a busy week for us. I want to contextualize it in the whole of Living Wage Week. There are events going on across the UK. They're also doing living wage places in smaller locations to really focus efforts that are going on there. There are events going on in Canada. There are events going on in New Zealand. We're really being part of what is a much bigger global movement. And in a world of COVID, it has become even more pertinent that we really, really focus on this, right? That we really figure out how to make sure people can cover their basic needs when they have to go into work every day, not have to work 2 jobs in order to make sure and cover even the basics. So what we do that might, aside from being able to cover on a national level and hopefully bring in some of the larger employers in your communities, is we also look at this in another step to a living wage, which is we think about this as a family concept for us. We don't look at individual living wages. We look at what would it actually cost to be able to support a family. And we're assuming too that there's 4 members of the family, 2 adults and 2 children, but we're also assuming that there's probably 1 3/4 workers per family. So it's not a matter of 1 person earning enough to support a family of 4. It's a matter of 1 person and a part-time person working enough to support a family of 4. And what we've done is we've calculated those rates across the country for every single county that exists. We've done it in depth in partnership with the Economic Policy Institute and developed with a methodology that aligns with what's being done globally. The point of doing that is that large multinationals that we want to be able to help bring in and get wages up to a living wage that are in your communities and that can help influence the larger community picture, they're already working in a lot of cases on living wage issues in the supply chain. And we want to make sure that we're aligning when we're thinking about what that means. If it's a family concept in the supply chain, it should be a family concept for your own workers, right? So what we're also hoping to do in our partnerships with all the local partners that we have here is say, if you're paying a living wage and you're certified locally and you're paying a little living wage that's been calculated for an individual, look at what we have in terms of a living wage that's been calculated for a family. Think about the next step of what you can work towards and what you can strive towards. When you're really motivated to make sure your employees are well cared for, this is a place that you can continue to grow in that living wage journey. And that's a really important piece to us. It's also a matter of we're looking at things with a detailed eye that understands a lot of pieces like benefits. Some of the local certifications are also, for example, changing rates based on if health insurance is present, somehow accrediting that. What we're looking at is in a detailed breakdown of what living wage rates are across the country, we're really understanding what do your benefits save workers and how can you provide benefits that will make major differences on other issues like gender equity. Things like childcare, which we all know are not common to provide as an employer across the US. When you're looking at how to achieve a family living wage, and childcare is one of the biggest costs of living in many areas, you suddenly realize that by providing full childcare reimbursements to all your workers, it costs a lot less than paying a full family living wage, but you're covering everyone's needs. And while you're doing that, you're cutting down the gender disparity that disproportionately falls on women who often have to stay home when childcare is not affordable. So living wage is more to me than just looking at hitting a number. It's about us really understanding as employers, as workers, as government, as other organizations, what are the levers that we can pull to make a real difference in many ways? How can we actually achieve a living wage for workers? So I'm going to leave you all with saying, before we start going into our wrap up, that there is a ton of information about how we run this. We have a multi-tiered certification system. It's something for continual improvement. Looking through benefits is complex. When you're looking at a county by county living wage rate across the US, it's complex. I'm going to give you one peek of what that looks like and ask all of you to spend a little time going to livingwageforus.org and looking at what that family living wage rate is where you are. Follow up on that and understand whether or not that makes a lot of sense to you. And we also have other events planned this week. If you want to know how our system works inside out, then come on Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern. We'll have another webinar that is just about going through all the details. If this is how it works, this is how our certification process goes. This is what you would expect. This is how you can find the information that you need. But the thing I really just wanted to show you before I close out, because we're getting towards the end, is a very simple, and if I can find the right screen to share, I will definitely do so. It doesn't want to come up. Give me 1 second. Or not. Great, got it. So this is our Living Wage for Us website. I hope you're able to see this. I wanted to show you how we look at and what sort of a picture looks like of living wages across the country. So if I went to tier 2 certification rates, and these are our family living wage rates, they will be higher than what you have locally. I'll also say the local organizations you've been working with have been highly accurate as well. We agree with a lot of the work that they have done in terms of estimating living wages. We have so much respect for how that looks at an individual living wage. A family isn't necessarily double that, right? It's not necessarily that much more than that. Because you get economies of scale, you don't need that much of a bigger house if you have a family than an individual, but it still works. I wanted to show you, we have these living wage maps, and no matter which place you're in, you're going to be able to go in and see exactly what the living wage rate is in that given location. You can sift around. I'm going to go into Richmond right now, since we have some from Virginia on here, and understand what does each cost of living amount to. We'll have the amount that is for housing, the amount that's for food, how much is on transportation, health insurance, and so on, until you understand how much is going through taxes. What's really important about this is for public policy, for government, knowing that, oh, wow, we have the biggest cost of living sitting in transportation in this area. We need to think about, are there public transportation options that we can provide in this particular place? In some places, it's childcare. Is childcare something that we can work with? From an employer perspective, though, this also gives you insight into benefits. If you know that one of the biggest costs of living is childcare, then it's an easy thing to think about how you can provide in order to save money as an employer and for workers by providing benefits. So what we're really trying to do is start by giving you information that no matter what perspective you are on this call, you should get a little bit more information on what it costs for a family to live in one of these locations. And I do want to bring your sights to one other thing. You'll notice that we have 2 rates for this. The $22.92, that's actually the cost of living, the hourly wage necessary for that county. For purposes of certification, we take surrounding counties as well and look at the lowest cost of living within a commuting zone. So that's why you'll see a slightly lower figure for that commuting zone figure. Either way, this is here as a resource, and you can search any place that you're at here to understand what can employer do, what is that breakdown, how do we start thinking about getting to a family living wage strategy. And then as Living Wage for Us, we're here to help you get there. So I personally want to thank you for joining us for this part of our launch. This has been a really exciting week already starting off. Couldn't be more thrilled than I am to partner with the amazing organizations I've had the chance to partner with here. And I really appreciate every one of you and your ongoing engagement. I really appreciate the partners as well. And I just want to finally give you all something to leave with that I hope you can do, some sort of share that I was hoping would make sense for each of you. So basically, we went through and we lost it. I want you to think about who, what, when, where, how, and we all know the why. The why is really a living wage makes a difference for workers. We've talked about that in a lot of different ways, but I wanted to talk through all of those questions really quickly as a call to action to each one of you. What I'm hoping that we can do for all of you that are listening to this today is think a little bit about, one, what is an action that you can take in your community to start moving it towards living wage? If you're a worker or consumer, can you have a conversation with your employer? Can you go to your favorite spots and say, hey, do you know that you could be living wage certified? Do you know, are you paying a living wage to your employees? That's important to me as your customer. I'm here every day. I want to make that known. Do you know of businesses in your area or employers in your area that really want to do right by workers and you think are going to be, yeah, they could, if they knew what a living wage was, or if they understood that these certifications existed, they would want to get on board, that you can have a conversation with. I want you to think through every day how you can approach the issue and see if everyone can report back to whoever invited you. So the organization that you first came in that talked to you and said to come in today and say, you know what? I'd like to see my local Home Depot as a living wage employer. I'd like to see, if I can do anything about that. Is there anything you can do? Because this is also about us. What asks do you have of us? So I'm hoping that after hearing everything we have from everyone, that we will actually start moving on this. It's great to sit around and talk, but hold ourselves accountable. So take one action or make one suggestion and just follow up with the organization that invited you so that we can hear what movement we're starting to make and so that we can build this Living Wage Places campaign as we continue to build it forward in a way that makes sense for all of you. So I wanted to say thank you, see if any of our panelists had any last comments that you wanted to say before we closed up for the day.
I just want to thank everyone else on the panel as well, and thank you, Michelle, for your partnership. Like I said earlier, I believe that, it does take all of us to create living wage places and to raise the wage floor in our communities and look at a more just starting place and make sure that workers are engaged in that process and business owners, and that we don't have to be on opposite sides. We can all be on the side of a just economy. So thank you so much, Michelle, for the work that you're doing. We are happy to partner with you. I'm always happy to work with my colleagues across the country, from Ithaca to Richmond to some other folks in North Carolina, and to some new folks that we're bringing on board in Nashville and in Georgetown, Texas. We're happy to be here and happy to be partnering and happy to be connecting with the worldwide movement to advance living wages. Thanks so much.
I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a member of the panel, I just share my story. And I mean, I really am being a part of understanding this. I didn't realize that this big map was out there. I mean, I cannot believe that. That is amazing. But I also think, as an employer, I don't know, it just feels good in your soul when you partner with your employees and they feel good, like that you're fair and they feel good about coming to work, because I think they're far more productive, they're far more happy, they're less likely to leave you. It's just, and I mean, it's just, to me, it's just it's a joy. Like I sat with my employers last week and I was like, well, what day should we close next week for Thanksgiving? Like who does, but I just think it's a fair thing. We work more as a team, and I just happen to be, my name's there on the door, but I feel like I can't do what I do without them. And so I feel like I approach things as a team, and it makes me feel good. It makes my soul feel good when I feel like they're happy to be at work and productive too.
I love everything that you just said, Annie, and I can't emphasize enough how great it would be if we can figure out how to quantify all of these really valuable things in ourselves. I think actually the last couple of years has really spoken to that in many ways, because none of us knew what we were doing, and we really needed to rely on our entire teams to work together. So I really appreciate that, and I think that it's been very inspiring to hear from all of you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Visit livingwageforus.org, and we have all of our events for the week on there. We have some global ones if you're interested and you're working on your supply chain. We have, if you're in the coffee industry, we have an event to help you figure out how to thrive on a living wage. So it's Good Jobs Institute and Lean Enterprise Institute really giving a lot of ideas for those already committed to it on how they can help run a better coffee business. And we have that hour-long session to really go through in detail how our system works. So I hope we might see some of you all again. And thank you. I really appreciate everyone. Have a beautiful day.